Hi, this is Dan Buller, retired electronics engineer, sitting out on the front deck of my houseboat again. It's salmon season, so we may see some boats go by. I want to talk about a couple of things. I don't mean to go destroy these people that are, claiming that the humps in a spectrum are due to LC resonance or, I'm sure these are nice guys and, Tony. And I say it that way because when I was in Taiwan working on this RAM deck, I was paired with this guy named Tony who was supposed to help me. And he was a Chinese guy, a Taiwanese guy who went to the U.S. and got his degree there. And he was completely fucking worthless. Not only was he completely fucking worthless, with a U.S. college bachelor's degree in electronics, he was a nose picker, and he gave me fucking SARS. So, he picked his nose, he typed on the keyboard, and then I typed on the keyboard, and I got fucking SARS from it. So it's bad. Another thing I want to mention is that this article that I wrote on LinkedIn, it's like the third article I wrote, and it kind of bothered me when I did it. I did the math, I used Excel, and you might say, Dan, why do you use Excel? What the fuck's wrong with you? When I was in ATE, the automatic test industry, I wrote my own stuff in Pascal. And luckily, a lot of places with an STS 6000 had a Sun terminal because there was a thing called plot to Sun view. And then it later became plot to whatever it was, plot to Sun. But before that, there was no access to any way to plot these things. And so I had to create a tool, made me a big friend in Hong Kong. My buddy Cliff So got a hold of me. We weren't friends at the time, but he got a hold of me and he said, I need a way to plot waveforms on the screen, on a terminal. And the only terminal they had was VT100, so I wrote a routine to plot waveforms and spectra on a VT100. And, that was quite a trick, and I'm an expert at the VT100, or I used to be. So I wrote this thing, plot to VT100. But I also did plot to Sun, and I wrote code in Pascal, and my buddy Daver that I talk about a lot, he wrote a really cool thing so that he could call up the DSP functions from Unix. And so he would call up FFT, give the arguments, and then pipe that to some other function to convert it to a magnitude plot, and then pipe that to plot to Sun, and he could do his experiments in a couple of seconds. Me, I had to write code, compile it. That's a wood duck. That's a wood duck. And it's probably his mate. Yeah, it's a pair of wood ducks. They sound like crying babies. Anytime you see ducks flying across the sky and it sounds like a crying baby, that's a wood duck. That's that beautiful, beautiful duck. Okay, so I used plot to Sun. I wrote all kinds of code in Pascal, and then later I had to move to C. I really hate C. And then C++. And it just got ridiculous, but I've written all this stuff in C, and I've used tools like, not Excel, I've used tools like Credence's AWT. In fact, I was an expert at AWT. I used to do something for fun that some people think is fucking crazy, but I would take a waveform, put two sine waves in it, a low frequency and a high frequency, and then I would take it and do an FFT on it. You can see the two bins come up. I would take the time domain wave and I would do a convolve with a filter that I made up. I'd make up a filter that would kill one or the other of the two spectral bins, and it worked like a sham. And I would do that for fun. And that's, doing it in frequency domain, you have to do it in rectangular format, but it was fucking fantastic. And I had to learn how to do this stuff myself because I only went to high school, you know, a little bit of college. Let me talk to you about this cool article that I wrote. It's called Harmonic Generalities, and it's kind of fun. Now notice in this wave, in this sine wave, I've done a symmetrical distortion, so I'm punching it down at, I think, 45 degrees, and punching it up at 45 degrees, and the spectrum shows you only get odd harmonics. And why is that? I claim that the even harmonics are canceled out because they're symmetrical. The two distortions are symmetrical. Now, let's do one where I distort just one side, okay? Asymmetrical, so now the even and odd harmonics show up. Notice that the odd harmonics look exactly the way they did before. They have the same pattern, exactly the same pattern, okay? Now I showed you that in some other things, and you would see that in distortion in chapter 3 if you looked at it. Okay, now, let's imagine you could do something, and that would happen, that could happen in a real device. You could. But that's because of the way the transfer function works. Now, what happens if you distort it on the top and bottom, but you do the opposite phase? So that is, instead of the glitch going inward, it goes upward, okay? So it goes upward in the top and in the bottom half cycle. You get only even harmonics. Where'd the odd harmonics go? Where do you think they went? The odd harmonics got canceled just like the even harmonics. It's exactly the same. And so I didn't really push this article too much because it's antithetical a little bit to law 3 of the Bullard laws of harmonics, where it says the even harmonics are canceled out by symmetrical distortion. However, it's also true that if you have asymmetrical distortion, that is symmetrical in one way but asymmetrical in another, it turns out that you get nothing but even harmonics and all the odd harmonics are canceled. Now, this never happens in real life. This never ever happens in real life. Amplifiers just don't work this way. But because you can do this in Excel, you can do these experiments, you find out that it's reciprocal. The odd and even harmonics can alternately be canceled out. So law 1 always holds true. But law 2 or law 3 is an issue because it doesn't quite, I mean, no one would ever see this. Nothing but even harmonics in a normal situation. So it kind of straightens you out if you do these kind of experiments. And you can use in MATLAB, Excel, whatever you use. You want to claim that Excel is not valid. Teradyne, who tests most of the chips in the world, Teradyne uses Excel to program their testers. So if there's something wrong with Excel, you better talk to Teradyne. Okay. Now, another thing I want to mention is that spectrum analyzers. Spectrum analyzers cannot be trusted, and there's a reason for that. Back when it was really funny, I was working at Tektronix, and I worked with a guy. In fact, I interviewed with a guy. It was pretty funny. A guy named Dan. I interviewed with this guy on a Sunday because he worked on Sundays, so he didn't have to commute during the week. And so we had an interview, and he laid this schematic in front of me of a VI. And he said, now I just want you to go through it, tell me what you can tell me about it. I said, oh, dude, that's not fair. And he says, okay, just work through it, go slow. He says, you can get it, you know, I just want to see how you analyze. I said, no, you don't understand. This is not fair. I know exactly what this is. He said, well, just take your time, go slow, and tell me what you see. And I said, okay, fine. So I took him through it. I'm walking him through it like and this is this, and this and this is this, and this wire goes here because of that. And he's like, slow down, slow down. So when you're in an interview and the interviewer says, slow down, you know you're in good shape. So anyway, this guy, Dan, that's also my name, he was a nice guy, not the brightest guy on the planet, but after I got laid off, and like a year afterwards, I did this work on distortion, and I wrote the book Distortion, and I had lunch with my old boss and this guy Dan, and I gave a copy to Dan. And Brian apparently bought his own, and he was intrigued. He thought it was pretty interesting, and he knew I was a smart guy. That's the guy who told me that I was the smartest guy who ever worked for Tektronix. So if I believe that. Because the people who work at Tektronix are fucking idiots. So anyway, but while we were having lunch, I was talking about the FFT, blah, blah, and he says, an FFT is just an FFT is just an approximation. That's what it was. An FFT is just an approximation. Well, we had another guy that worked at Tektronix who said that an FFT is just a button on a scope. And you know what? Both of those statements are right. Both of those statements are right. On scopes and on spectrum analyzers, those are right. Those are approximations. And the reason is because you capture them non-coherently, and that means you have to use a window, probably a Blackman or Blackman-Harris. And I've written an article about windowing, and you really shouldn't do it if you don't have to. Now, you might say, well, why wouldn't you have to? Because you might do things with coherent sampling. Coherent sampling is the only way to do things right. And if you haven't used coherent sampling, you don't fucking know what you're talking about. These guys who come up with all these theories about harmonics and stuff, they're totally wrong. And the reason they're totally wrong is because they've never done coherent sampling. I understand coherent sampling. I understand Fourier better than almost anybody else in the world. Fourier was a genius. And the Fourier transform is exactly right. The FFT that's the truth. Now, if you do a scope, you hit the FFT button on a scope, that's an FFT after the waveform's been windowed, and you can't trust it. You cannot trust it there. Okay? So, if you use a spectrum analyzer or a scope to look at harmonics, fuck you. You don't have a clue what you're doing. You don't have a clue. Never, ever do that. Now, you can go get an Applecose. I'm not trying to sell you an Applecose, but you can get an Applecose, or you can get some kind of machine like that. Audio Precision would probably do it. I worked on Schlumberger. I was in a class for Schlumberger on mixed signal, and I was learning about the mixed signal. It was a week-long class, and by the fourth day, I developed a class on the FFT for the students, and I told the instructor, let me take the class for a couple of hours. I will teach them the FFT, and then you give me my diploma, and I'll get out of here. So Schlumberger, which was very anal about the hours that you worked, you had to put in 40 hours a week. I got this instructor to let me off a day early so I could get out of the Bay Area and go back up and visit my kids and my parents up in the mountains. It was great. So I've worked on a lot of testers, a lot of tools. The MSWT from Next Test, I helped design the MSWT. The ASAP, which was really cool. ASAP on the Schlumberger, you just do a box, FFT, connect to another box, rectangular to polar, and then another box, plot to my screen. And it was really cool. It was like a lab view kind of thing if you use lab view. So you basically connect the boxes together and you get the result. It was really cool. So I've done a lot of these kind of things. So I'm not using Excel because I don't know how to use anything else. I don't want to have to run AWT, which supposedly runs on a PC, or MATLAB, or any of that shit. Excel is worldwide. Everybody can access Excel. So you can test my experiments. Remember, that's how science works. You try my experiments. with your own tool, Excel or whatever, and I give you a starting point on my webpage. I give you a place to start so you can use Excel to prove or disprove me. And that's your business. You can take a look in there and take a look at my code and see what I've done. Maybe I did something wrong. Who knows? I mean, could be. But that's up to you. That's up to you. The onus is on you because I've done my work. I've discovered this stuff. I've published it. I've made videos. I've written about it. It's your turn. You want to fuck with me? Go ahead. Go get into my stuff. But don't just say, oh, Dan doesn't know what he's fucking talking about. Because I do know what I'm talking about. I am a world-class mixed signal guy. So once again, from the river, Dan Bullard. See you later.